Maine's Office of Child and Family Services accused of negligence. What went down here? Maine's Office of Child and Family Services branch of their Department of Health and Human Services is facing disturbing allegations of neglect of child safety. See the building. Maine Child Welfare Services Ombudsman. Ombudsman. I always have trouble with that word. They're supposed to be the ones that see what's going on here, get to the bottom of things. They released their annual report on Maine's Department of Health and Human Services, DHHS, Office of Child and Family Services. Child Welfare Ombudsman is an impartial office that handles complaints made against Maine's DHHS office. 2024 report highlighted issues within that office that negatively impact child safety. 80 child welfare cases were investigated. This is according to WMTW News. That report revealed that in one case, a child was hospitalized for malnutrition as a result of neglect, then reunited with the parents for another month before being taken into state custody. Another investigation revealed that a child was left in an unsafe home for 6 weeks after the initial report to the department and further subjected to sexual abuse by a parent who was a registered sex offender. The Maine OCFS director, Bobby Johnson, says there are nearly 10,000 reports and investigations her office is assigned to. I'm already not going to like her because you're already starting with that. So I already don't like you, Bobby, and I think you know why. Director Johnson says the constituents that call into the Child Welfare Ombudsman represent a small portion of all of the families that we serve in a similar time period. Johnson took up the position last year. So what she's saying is, how I would phrase that rather, if this is the number that called in the complaints, there's a lot more who didn't, Bobby. And can we put up her picture? I know I shouldn't do this, but I can look at her picture and tell she don't give a you know what. Huh? Well, I mean, we got 10,000. What do you want me to do about it? I mean, just because other people didn't complain doesn't mean you have a stellar office. What she should have said was, look, those 2 cases that you're citing there, outrageous. And I'm going to get to the bottom of it. Is that so hard? What's so hard about that? I don't understand, Bobby. Dozens of people employed by Maine's Office of Child and Family Services have signed a letter of no confidence in the director of the office, Bobby Johnson. Maine Service Employees Association said 145 caseworkers, community care workers, case aides cited Johnson's failure to acknowledge or address critical safety issues relating to hoteling children in state. These are her own caseworkers. They're not saying thanks for defending us. They're saying, Bobby don't want that smoke. Bobby, we never see Bobby. She's not handling any of this. She's just collecting the check. And a lot of times these jobs, I don't know about in this case in Maine, but I know what happens here in Georgia. They're appointments, they're gifts, they're, hey, you're my friend, Fran. Put you in charge of this office if you want. You get a nice salary too. Almost like a no-show. I don't know about Maine, but I don't like Bobby. And I don't think you do either. Not when you know the facts. There's more. In their letter of no confidence, they include the following complaints. Aggressive children have assaulted staff in hotel rooms. A directive that staff should address safety concerns by calling local law enforcement. The lack of staff training to safely restrain dysregulated minors, something staff members do not want to have to do in the first place. Staff being mandated to cover hotel shifts and then having to immediately go to court hearings, causing concern that staff members do not have adequate preparation time for court hearings on those timelines. It continues. Staff being mandated to cover multiple shifts within 24 to 36 hours, despite the issue of driving while fatigued, including the transportation of youths in state custody. Staff not being certified to administer medications and concerns about medications that are not secured in locked boxes. Staff concerned that as a result of mandated long hours, vital information will not be documented in their cases and critical deadlines will be missed. According to the letter, workers said they've repeatedly raised those concerns in meetings with Johnson with no resolution whatsoever. She sounds awful. She sounds like 80% of the news directors I ever had. The reason we would get sued on stories because they wouldn't follow protocols and stayed in their office eating sandwiches with distended bellies. They just sat and ate sandwiches while everything crumbled around them, not caring about the viewer. And that was just the newsroom. This is real life. These are children, their lives, their welfare, their trauma, all of it at stake. And Bobby is chilling. Despite this, Governor Janet Mills released a statement expressing confidence in Child Welfare Office Director Bobby Johnson. This is like during Katrina, when George W. Bush, then president, said, "Way to go, Brownie." New Orleans was underwater. There were bodies floating. People were starving. There was some semblance of crime running rampant. He flew over Katrina. I know, we don't really talk about George W. because he's a saint compared to somebody else, right? That's come after him. Way to go, Brownie. Way to go, Bobby. You have my full confidence to keep abuse alive. I added that last part. How can you be the governor? And who's writing? Fran, can we pause here? Who the hell, if I'm the governor, and maybe I just care about, I was saying I need layers in this hair. Maybe I just care about the way I look as the governor of Maine. But wouldn't I have someone on my staff, someone like you, who would release a better statement than I have full confidence? This is nuts.
I mean, you know what's crazy about this case in Maine with child welfare services being so underfunded and allowing children in abusive situations to continue living there for weeks and weeks on end? I guarantee you it's happening all over the country. Every
right
single child welfare program in every state that is tasked with making sure children are safe and are being properly protected is stretched thin. And we, again, live in a time where Republicans pretend to care about children's welfare. They pretend to care about, strong families. They pretend to care about so-called groomers. And yet they do absolutely nothing to help shore up the base of social workers and people trained in child protective services, people working in these places. Because even these places are not, as we see with Bobby here, they are not free of their own corruption and their own mismanagement. And I think one thing is really important to point out. In the complaint that the 145 staff members wrote saying they have no confidence in their leader here, they cite the fact that they're being told to call law enforcement on children. So there you have it, people. We're being told by our officials, elected or appointed, that instead of solving the problems of child welfare, of substance abuse, of mental illness, of whatever, of housing, you know what you do? You call the cops. Oh, you call the cops so they can restrain a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 15-year-old, who knows, arrest them, give them to the cops because you don't have the funding or the training to calmly and correctly in a resourced way address this child's needs. It's absolutely disgusting. It is a perfect example of how we rely on policing and incarceration in this country to patch up all the holes that we have deliberately left open. And in fact, if the Child Protection Services and the Child Welfare Program of Maine had the budget of, I don't know, the Maine police force, what could they do? Who could they protect? So yeah, this one, and we know Doc has a lot to say about protecting children as a foster child himself. He could tell you, how and how not to. So we definitely need Doc to weigh in on this. But Sharon, is going on around the country, and Republicans and Democrats, nobody cares. Nobody's talking about this.
This is across party lines here, and you're right. This story's not going away. Doc is sure to get involved. Okay, fact, I think he wanted this one on today. But it's just so sick as Bobby blames the 80 people who complain. Oh, we get 10,000
Right? Can you
cases.
imagine?
What's the deal?
She's
Okay.
blaming people
Yeah.
for calling her very office, and she's saying,
They're
which is like,
troublemakers.
yeah, and that the number of people calling, the actual people who need help, are far fewer. BS.
Where did Bobby
BS.
come from? What are her
Seriously,
credentials?
seriously.
You sound crazy. You sound crazy, Bobby. And you
We
sound
all know
crazy,
how
Governor. Full
underreported.
confidence?
Yeah, we all know how underreported child abuse is. We
Thank
all know
you.
how difficult it is. Who would be doing that? The child?
And I would prefer they just say, we don't be caring about these kids.
Right.
If that would have more credibility because we could see it. Give you
Right.
more if you can stomach it. Past reports of child deaths. 2023 hearing involving lawmakers followed a series of increasingly critical reporting about the state's involvement in cases leading up to 4 child deaths that occurred within weeks of each other in the summer of 2021. Oversight Committee ordered its watchdog agency, the Office of Program Evaluation and Government Accountability, to review and report back on the circumstances surrounding each death. It also is suing DHHS to gain full access to the original case files, which the department says are only available to OPEGA, not lawmakers. We don't have a boss. Portland Press Herald with the reporting. Files lawmakers are seeking include one on Maddox Williams, age 3, whose mother, Jessica Trefethen, 36, was found guilty in October of depraved indifference murder. In December, she was sentenced to 47 years in prison. The other files relate to the deaths of Jaden Harding, 6 weeks old,
Oh my
Haley
God.
Godding, 3 years old,
Oh my
Silas
God.
Melvin, 1 month old.
Oh my God.
All of the children allegedly died at the hands of one of their parents, Spectrum News. All these deaths.
And it's just like, don't get me. I mean, I know we got to move on, but it's just going to keep happening, as we, take away people's rights to reproductive freedom, as we fail to support new parents, as we,
Yes.
we strip, there are red states right now who do not have a Medicaid expansion as stipulated under Obamacare, that the government would pay for 90% of it, and they
I
would
don't want
take
the
care of
money.
so many poor families and children, specifically newborns. I don't want the money. I would rather score points against a fictitious boogeyman, Barack Obama,
I don't want
than
blue money.
help out new families and young children. It's so sick and twisted, and Republican ideology that purports to be pro-family is what has gotten us here.
Well, Trump said he was going to protect the women whether they like it or not. So remember, they go after the women too. Where are the men in
Of
this?
course.
Didn't take. I had sex ed. I think I know how babies are made. Even in a petri dish, you need 2 things have to come together, and okay, it's science. Former Senator, current child advocate Bill Diamond, who created the nonprofit Walk a Mile in Their Shoes, Maine, says he's frustrated by what he calls a lack of improvement with OCFS over the years. Diamond says, quote, "It's very frustrating because what we see is either a child who dodged a bullet or otherwise was not fatally injured or injured because of whatever luck there was. The other thing is that we know what's happening on a continual basis. So all these kids won't be that lucky," Diamond added. "We all need to work together to fix this system, but it's so broken. And nobody seems to care. And when people care, they block them from the records. The lawmakers aren't allowed to have the records." We do want to thank, special thanks, because you all, this is a community, and we take our cues from you. That's why we put up some, you are our boss. TYT, you're our boss. Jonah Morton, thank you for bringing this story to our attention. Fran, final thoughts on this one. I'm disgusted. We really don't give a damn about kids who they're not asked to be born. They just show up, and we're asking for basic services. Don't sexually assault them, feed them, don't beat them up, have them in some kind of environment that's somewhat clean and healthy for them.
I mean, and
They're
this
not
is
asking for a lot.
But this is the problem with only thinking of ourselves as individuals, and individualism reigns supreme, and utter libertarianism, and government has absolutely no role to play. You are dooming children in abusive situations, in unsafe situations, to remain in those families. And then you say, well, every life is a blessing. No, it's not. It's actually not in those conditions. And certainly if you don't fund properly the government deep state services that are required to rescue them and adequately place them, because we haven't even talked about the problems of foster care, but adequately place them in good homes that are also supported, then what are we doing here? You're just creating a pipeline of miserable people, and then you want to blame the homeless, or you want to blame the mentally ill, or you want to blame those who are addicted to drugs, and yet you literally are creating factories for them. It really is like goes to the heart of what is wrong with this country.
Sometimes I walk around, we'll move on to this next one, and for some reason, it just hits me. Maybe I've been doing news too long or too many years in my career, where I start thinking about statistics as more than statistics. And I think to myself, boy, it just a minute went by and somebody's being held hostage or beaten or worse right at this very moment while I'm walking around here. That's the way my mind works. And I start thinking about these kids who are right now, as I'm speaking, they're being harmed and they feel like, and the worst part is no hope. Who's going to help me? In Maine, it's an open question.